Scott, you put out a tweet yesterday which caught my eye. It was a scientific study looking at specifically whether Delta prevented Omicron, but also, and maybe more importantly, whether Omicron prevents Omicron, meaning if you've got an Omicron, can you get it again, and what kind of antibodies are created? And it seemed to suggest that actually getting Omicron is not going to prevent you from getting it in the future. And what does that portend if true?
Look, that's been true all the way through. There's been sort of this small camp that thinks that once you get COVID, you're never going to get it again, and the immunity from it is durable, like we saw with SARS and MERS. That was never true. But what we saw with the previous variants was that the immunity persisted for a longer period of time. What we're seeing with Omicron, and there's now pretty good evidence around this, the Siegel lab put out some studies around this, the Bloom lab did, and now you saw this study out of UCSF. It appears that the immunity conferred by infection from Omicron isn't that durable. You probably have a period of immunity that lasts at least 3 months, probably upwards of 6 months, but eventually the antibodies do wane. Now, you have residual T and B cell immunity. We've talked about this, so you're going to be protected against more severe outcomes, probably, but you're probably going to get subsequently infected or reinfected with Omicron. So it's not a durable immunity. It's certainly going to be sufficient to provide a level of immunity across this population, given how many people we've seen infected with Omicron, to drive prevalence levels down very low. But heading into the fall, we're probably going to need to contemplate revaccination if you want to maintain your immunity. And the best speculation we've seen around why Omicron isn't conferring a more durable immunity is it's more of an upper airway infection. So we see less durable immunities with upper airway infections, and it's less virulent. That since it's a less severe infection, it's not inducing as robust of an antibody response and an antibody-induced immunity.
When do you believe that the vaccine makers, including Pfizer, of course, which you're on the board of, are going to make the decision about what the vaccine that they're going to be releasing next fall actually looks like? And whatever that is the goal simply going to be to prevent hospitalization and death? Or do you think that a vaccine that specifically goes after Omicron is going to prevent infection more similarly to what we were seeing with Delta? And again, it didn't prevent it entirely, but the numbers seem to be better at that time.
Yeah, look, I do believe, and this is pure speculation, but my belief is that if you have a vaccine that is formulated against this variant, and this variant becomes the dominant lineage, and future mutations happen within this lineage, so the version of COVID that's circulating next fall is some mutated version of Omicron, that if you're vaccinating against Omicron, if that's sort of the base of the vaccine, I do believe that there is a really good likelihood you're going to restore a lot of the protection against infection that we saw with the original vaccine when the vaccine was formulated against the circulating strain, against wild type, and subsequently against B.1.1.7. In terms of the timing of that decision, that's a decision that's going to have to be made by global public health authorities. And they're working on the process of what the framework is for making that decision. But it's not just a U.S. decision, because if the vaccine makers switch over a good portion of their production to producing this new vaccine, you're going to have to provide it globally. And there's going to be a lot of countries, and I suspect there'll be some resistance from the WHO, because they'll worry it will exacerbate vaccine inequity, because they've now, deployed 10 billion doses globally. A lot of countries have gotten the existing vaccines. You switch over to a new vaccine, you've got to start that process again and get that new vaccine into countries. And we know it's very hard to distribute vaccines in a lot of these less developed nations. So this is going to be a global process. It's not a decision that the vaccine makers are going to make by themselves.